Hi, I'm Jessie Diamante, a member of Women's Co-op and a resident of Battle Creek.
Hi, I'm Erica Brown, also a member of Women's Co-op and a resident of Battle Creek.
Today we want to talk to you about a documentary that we've been creating based on poverty in Battle Creek. Erica, you've been a member of Women's Co-op for about 6 months, is that right?
Sure have been.
Do you feel like poverty is something that personally has affected your life?
It has personally affected me. I have had issues with having to find work, or I can't get work because I don't have adequate daycare. Then I have to find resources to help pay my bills, or resources to help with food. I didn't feel like I was in poverty, but in reality, I was below the poverty line. How about you, Jessica? Does it affect you personally?
It's funny that you mentioned the poverty line, because I definitely think it's something that's affected me, but definitely right at that poverty line. I grew up in poverty, and as an adult, I kind of felt like I was okay, like I was out of poverty. Being a member of Women's Co-op and even working with Women's Co-op for a while, I did a lot of classes on different things to deal with poverty, and I started realizing that I actually was in poverty, and I just never felt like I was. For my family, it's always felt like we rode that very thin line of we didn't quite make enough money to get ahead, but we usually made too much money to qualify for any of the programs that would help you. So it was always a struggle of needing resources and trying to find resources in the community that were available to us.
Yeah, that's the issue. And when there are resources available to the community, then you have to think, are they able to get the resources? Do they have IDs? Do they have birth certificates? Do they have everything that they're going to need to receive the help? And a lot of times they don't have what it takes to receive the help, and they still end up in poverty, and they end up not receiving the resources that the community has to offer, or they can't even go around and access the resources that the community has to offer.
I definitely agree with you, and I think that there's also a bit of a tightrope where people are walking that thin line of trying to maintain not making too much to lose their resources, but still getting the resources like childcare and things like that. I think this is going to be something interesting that we're going to explore together.
Yeah, we sure are. So join us as we take this conversation to the streets of Battle Creek.
How do people end up in poverty?
No jobs in Battle Creek. Everything seems to be closing.
There's a lot of avenues to get to poverty. Some are a result of generational effects. Some are self-destruction. Some are self-made, unintended consequences, divorces. Boy, you name it, and people can end up in poverty pretty quick.
I think that's a combination of several different pieces: family, education, the neighborhood they've grown up in, their surroundings. So I truly feel like it's a combination of several different things that might be out of their control, but also within their control, like the decision making. So if they see, a parent or someone making decisions that are not so good, but they don't know any different, I think that continues the cycle.
I think more than some are probably generational, because I think it's hard to get outside of something that when you only know one thing. Also, there are, maybe somebody has like an addiction to something and they can end up there, or divorce, or like house fire, just things like that maybe. And then of course, maybe some people maybe just don't want any more than that.
The lack of transportation to get to jobs, and jobs that pay a livable wage.
I've been told I don't have recent work history.
Mental health. Lack of a support system.
Domestic violence.
Having a criminal background sometimes prevents you from getting jobs, so that leaves you stagnant into your situation.
Physical disability, not being able to work, but also not qualifying for certain help.
The inability to find reasonable daycare so that you can work a job that pays worth anything.
I'm a single mother, and I think my biggest hardship is I can never keep daycare, which means I can't keep consistent work. So which continuously means I have to lose my job and just restart over.
I believe because we don't help people get jobs like we should.
Nobody's really hiring, they're hiring temps. I've been coming to Michigan Works for years, and I've never, not once, gotten a job through Michigan Works. I've always gotten it myself by getting out there. And then if you go online and you're running some of this equipment, some of these machines, and you find out you're getting $8 an hour, and the job actually pays, if you're hired, like $30 an hour. So that's like a kick in the teeth, you know. We're being pimped out. Some of them even tell you, you can work here as long as you want, but we're not hiring.
So the path to poverty is kind of like the roads of Michigan. Some have potholes and some don't. So some of us are going to hit a pothole and drive away unscathed without too many issues. Others are going to hit a pothole and they're going to lose a tire, lose an axle, and that changes everything.
No one grows up and says, I want to be poor, right? So poverty is not a lifestyle that you choose. It's a lifestyle that unfortunately you land in. You could end up in poverty from a wealthy or a stable lifestyle by a loss, right? Loss of employment, loss of a business. So it's certainly not anything that anyone chooses. It's by nature of circumstances of life.
Most people in America don't have enough of a savings built up that they can rely on if they do end up missing a paycheck or two. That right there can start the downward spiral into poverty.
It isn't something that people really get excited about. It isn't a lifestyle that people are like, that's exactly where I want to be in my life. Most people are born into poverty, and it's a real struggle to try and get out of that. That's one thing, but there's situational poverty as well, and I really feel as though there are a number of ways that people end up in poverty, but also remain in poverty.
We find that not everybody gets the same start as everybody else. So sometimes we see that the playing field is not always level. There aren't always the same opportunities sort of through education and through family background that would set everyone up to sort of have the same kinds of opportunities. So in some ways, saying that people kind of end up in poverty, there's a implication that they've done something to fail, when in fact there are a lot of things in place in the system that make it challenging for everyone to succeed in the same way. So in many ways, I've kind of viewed poverty as it's related to the bigger picture of the way that we kind of function as a society.
I believe that poverty is a policy. It's a policy outcome that that creates winners and losers. And I think poverty in this country, especially over the past several decades, has been exacerbated and deepened by poor policy decisions.
A lot of times people have some misconceptions about how a person ends up in poverty. Poverty is, for most, it's a transitional state. There's a situation that happens that causes a person to lose employment or lose access to certain elements within their life, and they end up in a position where it's becoming difficult for them to provide for themselves and their family. I don't think anyone plans on living in poverty. I don't think that's the state that people naturally will remain in. People, by their very nature, want to move from that space to the point where they feel they have the freedom and the capacity to provide for themselves and the people that they love. I think a lot of times it's just there's a situation that happens. It could be one too many medical bills. It could be the closing of a factory. It could be the death of a family member or the impact on the mental health of one of the family members. Any of those things can contribute to that basic spiral that takes a person from where they are able to live and provide and have the type of life experience that they were hoping for into a position where they are now struggling.
They're lazy because of the simple fact they legalize marijuana, and also they don't motivate people to get up. They don't say, oh, here go a job for felons, here go a job for people who sitting on the couch playing a video game. So yeah, they're gonna just continue to be lazy.
That stereotype of people in poverty are lazy is kind of ridiculous. I look at all the situations and the fact that, sometimes those that are in poverty are the most hardworking because they have 2, 3, maybe 4 jobs to try and just make ends meet. But also the situations of childcare or transportation, things that are the barriers of them getting out of poverty are playing a role in that. It's not the fact that they are lazy, because I'm sure that there are a lot of folks that would love to be able to do and provide for their families and get them out of poverty.
Not true. There's a lot of people that want to work out there. It's just that they don't have the means, a lot of times no transportation, things like that. So we don't do enough to help them in order to get their jobs.
Absolutely not, because I'm in poverty. I'm not lazy. I go to work every day.
This is a job. Looking for a job is a job these days. It's really tough.
I just think that they sometimes feel very discouraged and defeated.
It's one of those things that we as a nation have as a kind of cultural narrative, and it comes from a very long-term framework of thinking that if you don't make it in our society because we have all of these opportunities, then it's because you're lazy. You're not doing enough to get ahead. You're not working hard enough. You're not looking forward in the way that you should be. And it's all kind of a merit-based system where it's based on sort of individual opportunity and individual failing. When in fact, we know that the majority of people who live in poverty are working poor. They may work more than one job. They're supporting families. They're trying to maintain households. These are not lazy people.
I've had a job since I was 15 years old, and I had a period in my life where I struggled, right? there are different levels of poverty, right? So I can never say I can relate to what it's like to not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, right? I was always able to eat, but I wasn't always able to choose what I wanted to eat, right? So there are levels of poverty that I think people need to understand, that there are different faces and experiences, that we want to be careful not to just assume that it's the person who is just not doing enough, right? I think the other thing that people, it would be helpful to understand is it requires an incredible amount of emotional energy to live in poverty. I don't think many people understand what it takes in order to live in poverty, right? You are drained, right? I mean, most of your energy is spent in survival. So you are thinking minute by minute on how I'm going to survive. How am I going to survive? You don't have anything left by the time you're done raising your kids, feeding your family, gathering up the next $5 from day to day. You are drained.
To believe that a person in poverty, that I can look at this one moment in their life and thereby understand the characteristics or the spirit of that individual based upon this one sliver of time in this person's life, that it can't be correct. It can't be true. I was in the military, and in the military you're called on to do lots of different things, including fight and, if need be, kill in defense of this country. Because I served in the military, does that mean that I'm a violent person or that I'm a killer? Or that in that time, in that space, I performed the duties as I needed to in service of this country? I'm a pacifist. I but I am a pacifist because I recognize the dangers of and the impact of taking a life. And because of that, I'm a completely different person. If a person judged me from what I was back then on who I am now, they would miss completely and totally who I am. And I think a lot of times in communities, people look at people in poverty and assume that they're lazy or that they don't have any drive without actually burrowing down a little bit deeper. And it's easy to place them in this small box, and that's for our personal comfort. But that doesn't necessarily describe the experience of the person that is actually in poverty. I think a lot of times if people would just drill down one layer deeper, they would find that people in poverty are working hard, and they are putting in more time and effort than the average person, and unfortunately receiving less results and far less recognition for their efforts.
We are far from lazy. I'm sure there's a few that we can definitely put in that category, but on the general, no. Most people in poverty, we're just trying to survive day by day.
I agree with her. We're not lazy. I was in poverty, then I was doing very well, and then I lost everything and I'm back in poverty.
I think being in poverty is both incredibly challenging and incredibly expensive. Oddly, it doesn't seem logical, but it is. So no, people in poverty are not lazy because it takes a lot of energy just to go through and process all of the various systems. And it's really expensive to be in poverty, which is another barrier to getting out of it to begin with.
I'm on the fence. Because yes, there are people, could use people, that's general, that are lazy, that are in poverty. And there's people that are not lazy. I see it when I volunteer, even here. These people, not lazy. They came out, they came and they're speaking. But there's some people that have the tools, they know all the resources, but they want somebody to knock on the door and open it for them. So in that case, there are some people that are lazy in poverty, and there's some people that are really trying and they need that help.
Again, if you haven't lived through these things, you wouldn't know what to compare it to, and all you see is what they're not doing, but you don't see what they are doing, what they have done, what they're waiting to do, because this didn't come through in the mail or whatever the case may be. I personally, I don't consider myself lazy, but I get frustrated like everybody else.
So I think no matter what socioeconomic level you're at, there are lazy people. I think there are really lazy rich people and really lazy middle class people, and there are probably lazy people that are in poverty. But I don't think that's the piece that sets people apart. I think people in poverty are amazing workers and they're amazing jugglers. They are some of the hardest working people that I know. They work 2 or 3 jobs, and they juggle all of the other things that they are required to do. And it is in a pretty amazing way of managing time, actually. And the other piece that I think is pretty interesting is that we could have seniors that have worked their whole lives in jobs that make fairly little. And when they retire, they are in poverty because of the jobs that they have worked their whole life.
Nobody has mentioned the single parent. It doesn't say a mom and dad of this family of 4. It doesn't speak about the single parents that are raising 3 children and living on $8,000 to $10,000, or the disabled parent trying to raise children on disability that's only $8,000 a year.
I'll agree with that, but I'll also say all of us have seen some of those out there that are looking for every dollar that they can possibly get, and some of those people work the hardest for those dollars that they do get.
Personally, I'd like to be lazy in poverty, but being the head of the household for a multi-generation family and being disabled, I don't have time to be lazy.
Should people in poverty be allowed to have assets? Assets being bank accounts, vehicles, homes, things of that nature.
If they don't, how are they going to get ahead? I mean, you have to have a car to go to work. You have to have these things.
I stand in long lines at food banks. I get assistance from the state, what I have to, and I bust my tail everywhere I can to make sure everything else we need is gotten. There's days I will spend literally from sun up to sundown working the system just so that my children will have what they need the next day.
I do feel that you should be able to have access like everybody else. So, like, your situation changes. So, like, you might be doing good, you get laid off. So why do you have to sell your 2018 Camaro just because you got laid off from your job and you need assistance now? And that's what DHS would look at. They would look at, well, you got this car, sell it. Okay, you sell the car, then what? Now you can't get no job because you ain't got no transportation. So it's like, it's a vicious cycle. Like, they don't want to see you succeed. They don't want to see you get out of poverty.
Until I got my car last year, a car note, first time ever having a car note, it didn't make sense to me that they considered a vehicle to be a luxury or an asset. I didn't realize the severity of what they were trying to say, but basically they took my food stamps from my children because, according to them, I gross so much money a month. Okay, well, I pay full coverage, that's $250, and I pay a car note for $430, just so I have heat and reliable transportation to get me to and from. Not because I have a 2020 fresh off the lot. I bought a car that I could afford with my little credit and the couple of dollars that I had. And so now when I go to try to apply to get assistance for this, that, and the other, they look at my check stubs. And my check stubs are not what I have, it's what I were paid before taxes, before Gerber Life, before all of these other things that I pay for to better the lives of my children, not to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak.
We've already mentioned that we have to have good credit to get jobs. So how are we supposed to better ourselves if we can't have a bank account or a vehicle to get to and from?
How else do you build your dream if you can't put money away? And then they turn around and cut you off because you have money in the bank? How else are you supposed to buy a home or a car or do something for your children? Of course they should have assets.
I believe they should, because what do they have to gain or different things like that? If they have an access, maybe it's a car or a little something in the bank account, they should be able to build on that, because if you take all those things away, that puts them back further.
People should have assets who are on public assistance. If we demand that they don't, they will always be in poverty. We're going to help them build. At least my vision of how we get people out of poverty is we build on. We don't take away, we don't rob them or take away assets. We build them up so that they can then be self-sufficient.
Just because you're somebody who's working and you're at a poverty level or you're trying to get out of poverty doesn't mean that you shouldn't have the things that you wish and desire, that all of us want and desire. And so, we're all human. We all have wants and desires, and just because we're on public assistance doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to attain those.
Assets are the thing that allow for sort of long-term stability, that allow for a safety net when one loses a job or there's a major transition in life, maybe it's health or whatever it happens to be. Assets are those things that really provide us something beyond the basic income, where income doesn't always allow us to have enough cash on hand to pay for something that's broken on your car, or to be able to pay for something on a home or something like that. So assets are what contribute to long-term success.
Each person kind of has a different lifestyle, and I don't think it's always fair for someone to finally get a job and start working and then all of a sudden they're cut off of their food stamps. I've met many individuals in work that I've done previously who say, they actually have more money by staying on assistance than actually trying to go out and work.
Thinking about people making it out of poverty, first it's important to define what making it out of poverty is, right? So not everyone wants to live a wealthy lifestyle. Sometimes making it out of poverty just means I have enough, right? I have enough, And if an accident or an emergency occurs, I still have enough, right? So understanding that making it out of poverty doesn't always mean making it to a wealthy lifestyle. I think a lot of it is rules, right? So people may push back on that and say, there aren't any rules. Everyone has access to wealth. Everyone, it's a matter of just the know-how, right? If you read enough books and you connect with the right people, everybody can have access to wealth or just stability even. There are rules. And if you don't believe that there are rules, ask a wealthy person to learn how to be poor. And I know that it sounds like, oh, that's, anybody can be poor. It really isn't, right? There's a lot to what it's like to live in poverty, and there's a lot of resilience, right? If you ask someone who's wealthy, who's used to having to take $10 a week and feed their families, right? They'd have to learn some rules. So I think understanding what the rules are is really important, and providing access to the rules to everyone. I don't think we realize how many boundaries and barriers that we put up for people to get to where they need to go. Credit is a perfect example, right? If you have good credit, you have a ton more opportunities. If you have bad credit, right, that reduces a lot of your opportunities.
First, you have to understand how you got in and why you're in and what the mechanisms are that have you in that place. Getting out requires having some level of knowledge or education about where it is that you want to go or what things need to take place for you to get out. A lot of times that's not possible, though, if you're living day to day and you're in survival mode.
People can make it out of poverty by several combination of things. I think that education, family, there's lots of resources around them that people don't know exist, and so getting that out to those communities that need it, like the neighborhood hub. They're going into the neighborhoods that have a little bit more hardship, and giving them resources to help them boost morale, boost employment opportunities. And so I feel like we need to get more into the communities instead of being stationary.
I think they should go out and get a job. I think everybody, if they're able to work, should go out and work.
That's a tough question to answer because we can make it out if they help us.
If I'm on SSI and I tried to get a job and they wanted to cut my check and take my my insurance away, I don't think that's right. And I did it legally. So I had to find a job paying me $10 an hour under the table, which is not legal with SSI, but there's no other way to do it. So it's not right.
Well, I've got a pretty good job, and if I get more than 13 hours of overtime a week, I make $5 an hour for all my overtime, and that's just ridiculous. How are you ever going to get anywhere? Say, okay, I want to work 60 hours this week. It's all going to go to Uncle Sam. It don't make no sense. So why would you just work your 40 hours if you could work 40 hours? But the possibility ain't there. If you want to work 60 hours and you can't, the government's going to take your money anyway.
With determination, they have to just keep trying to find the help and the resources. And we need to offer more resources to help them.
It's a sacrifice, sacrifices of a lot of different things, the knowledge of different resources that are out there.
The biggest thing that I find that's disheartening is when I first came here, there was only manpower and Kelly services. Now there's so many temp services that you can't count them. And you're not hired in, you don't have any benefits, no insurance, so that's hard, and you don't know if they're going to let you go at any time. They could call you up and you thought you did a great job for that day, but your, what's the word they use? Your assignment is over. So you're just still stuck out here in basically temp world.
there's this myth that this is a land of opportunity, that you can pull yourself up by the bootstraps and raise your level of income and your lifestyle, and that's just simply wrong. That it's exactly a myth.
They learn to adapt. They learn to work for the around the systems in our community. We don't always recognize sometimes the barriers that there are for a lot of the people in poverty, and so they learn to circumvent those barriers by living by their wits. A lot of times people are smarter than they think.
People can make it out of poverty by their choices. They need to make the choice to rise above it, make better choices. Think about the choices about education, about their living circumstances, about their future, and what the choices they make impact their future. They can be anything and have anything they want by the choices they make.
For a person that's in poverty, trying to leave poverty is often difficult because the same things that got them into the poverty are often some of the same barriers that they face as they try to leave poverty. Since they didn't plan on being there, leaving that space becomes even more difficult because it can be that same piece of luck or that same happen chance that is locking them into that position. So when a person's trying to leave, it's sometimes they have to develop new tools, sometimes they have to develop new skills or new assets, or unfortunately leave behind things that they've been counting on their entire life.
I believe that people in poverty can make it out of poverty by getting educated, by having individuals who have done so, go back and lend a helping hand or show them how to navigate, different systems. I also believe that, sometimes it really is just, hard work, and just sometimes things just work out to where you're able to, get out of poverty, just, I almost want to say sometimes by luck.
It takes work to get out of poverty, no matter how you got there. So if you lost your job, you need to find a job. If you don't have a job, you're looking for a job. If you have a job that keeps you in poverty, you have to look to better yourself to get out of poverty. But the real question is, how do you do that when you have a family that you're caring for, when you have kids that you want to be with? So if you're working 40 hours a week and you have kids at home, night school may not be an option until they're grown. So that cycle of poverty can't change overnight for someone. It can take a long time to get out of poverty.
I also think that there are cultural things about living in poverty that never leave you, right? So I was raised in a family with little means, and my father always worked, but a lot of the money went to things that weren't bills, and it caused us to move a lot. We lived without frequently. And I have to say that even as a working professional, a lot of those attitudes are still just in my DNA, and I can't escape them. This idea of scarcity and that there's never going to be enough and you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop is something that stays with you. So I think there's the reality of people who don't have the resources they need. There's also the fact that those who've experienced that at some point in their life have that with them. At least it's been my experience throughout their life.
People in poverty can make it out of poverty with assistance. Let's put it that way. I think every major change that happens really, I guess, in anyone's life, and especially those who are struggling to make ends meet for themselves and for their family, need somebody to partner with. Whatever agency in the community that might be relevant to their particular needs, that assistance is needed to sort of have partners to walk the journey with.
It's important really for communities to work together to provide safety nets for, again, all residents, no matter what their income is. I work for the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and we believe that in order for children to thrive, families need to thrive, and that means communities also need to thrive. And it's really all of those interconnected people, elements, places that really should work to support sustainable, lasting change in our communities. I think there are other strategies, services, and activities that anyone can take advantage of in this community. Everything from financial coaching to job training services.
By utilizing and understanding community supports and resources, kind of reaching out, finding out what's available, and allowing individuals to help them set goals and realize their strengths, and to achieve different opportunities in life with the different support system that's surrounded by them.
It's one of the reasons why we've been an active partner as part of our BC Vision Community Transformation Initiative. And this initiative really is bringing together people from all across this community to really work to ensure that Battle Creek can be a place for all of us to thrive, no matter what our income level is.
I think that there is a lot of community help, but it's not enough for what situation people may be in, because everybody's situation is different.
Keeping this as short as I can, I'll share a little bit of my story. I am a single mom because my children's father passed away. I lost my 7-year job, good paying job, because I had cancer. So now I'm in trying to rebuild my life by learning another skill. In doing that, I need a vehicle, and there are no resources in this town to help me get a vehicle to be able to further and better myself. And I'm taking care of both my parents and both my kids myself. So no, I don't think there's enough resources.
I mean, if people in poverty could help make some decisions, I think it would definitely turn some things around. If they would just open their minds and have a true heart and just honestly be there to help other people, things would actually change.
Well, I have to admit, I've never been in that situation, thank God. But I do volunteer at the pantry, Franklin Food Pantry, and we are given handouts most often saying that there are ride programs for the community and 211 information. I'm going to ask you, do you think you are given the resources and where to find them?
We could use a lot more resources.
The resources that we have, again, kind of approach the symptoms rather than the underlying problem. Are the resources here to effectively deal with it? Absolutely. It's not a $4 or $5 billion problem in Battle Creek. It's a fraction of that. But are we using them effectively? Again, I come back to my earliest, quickest answer. If we were using them effectively, poverty wouldn't exist.
I feel that there aren't enough resources in the community. There's a lack of homeless shelters and transportation help.
I think there's also a big problem of the fragmentation of resources in this community. So there's like a little bit of money here and a little bit of money here and a little bit of money here, like over like 200 different places. And so it's really hard to track down who's got what you need, because it's so, if you have one kid, you go here. If you have two kids, you go here. If you're a foster kid, you go here. If you're a grandparent, yeah.
We don't have a big brand name college in our city, but when you look at other cities that have big colleges, there's always trams running like till 2 a.m. Like why? Why just for college students to go up and down the strip? There should be trams on our main roads that do get to the factories, that do get to these jobs that people need.
As far as like for me personally with my kids, being able to get help and assistance with daycare, and just as far as my kids are in school, so that I can go back to work and still be able to like get them from school, and it's just hard.
We do have resources. We have a lot of resources. Unfortunately, access to those resources are limited. If you need clothes, you have Charitable Union. If you need food, you've got Salvation Army, food banks, what have you. But none of that stuff is useful if, like me, you can't drive and you can't get to those things. Buses, you can only take maybe 6 small bags onto the bus with you. When I leave Charitable Union, I've got 5 people. So I've got about 6 or 7 huge bags of stuff that I have to take home. I can't take that on a bus. If you have huge bags, you can only take maybe 1 or 2. The bus driver won't let you on otherwise. So access to resources is a huge problem, and now that we don't have a cab service, then that makes it even harder. But even when we had a cab service, it was ridiculously expensive. I could only make it to Charitable Union once or twice a year because it was just too expensive for me to get to.
Since I been in the situation I'm in since I got ill, I'm at a poverty level, to the point to where I found out that there's lots of resources out here if you choose to use them. And not saying that nobody's lazy or anything like that, but it's your choices and striving toward your goal of getting back to where you were or going forward, wanting more out of life. You have to be motivated, and you got to, if you want more, you have to do more.
First, I want to say that poverty is of the mindset, period. When I look at resources, I do not look at resources as DHS or the co-op. I look at it as every individual person in here. So I feel like, for one, we need to change around the way that we think and utilize each other. Like you were saying that you had to push forward and keep it moving. Like, I am on a bike literally for a year straight. I don't look at it as, it's the hardest thing and I'm stuck in poverty. No, I need to get out and fight for what I believe in. And what I believe in is me and my daughter, and pushing forward and being positive, connecting with people. We are totally looking at this at a different mindset, and we have to take it to another level in order to get ourselves out of it.
Yes, I believe there's some resources that help a lot of people, but there's not enough resources to help everybody.
Rich people don't help the poverty.
Many of our partners are really working to make sure that these services are provided free of charge. For example, we have one grantee, Michigan Works, that offers employment hubs at Parkway Manor, New Level Sports, as well as a community action agency. And this is one place where you can walk in and get access to employment services and other services that will help remove barriers for employment.
Battle Creek has a lot of nonprofit organizations. We're a very caring community. So we have a lot of organizations who have a focus on supporting children and families and communities who are in need. So I think we have the resources. I'm not sure that the organizations have the resources that they need in order to support the population that they're trying to serve. So I think of one barrier, and it's a well-meaning barrier, but I think sometimes it's always worth us taking a look, is many of these organizations don't have access to unrestricted support, so they can't fund the people who are trying to support the populations who need the assistance. So our organizations are also in poverty. The same organizations who are trying to end poverty are also growing with their participants, right? They don't have access to the resources they need, and partially because most of the funding resources available are restricted resources. And I say it's well-meaning because, sure, we want to provide responsible funding resources, right? But I think that as a community, we can work on increasing trust, and assuming that people have good intentions and are going to do the right thing, and then maybe build in some reporting structures. But I think one of the challenges we have in this community is that the organizations that can support folks don't have the resources that they need.
I think that the resources we have are effective, but I feel that there could always be more resources available. I don't necessarily think it's always just about throwing more money at a situation, but having more investments in our staff and our people in the community that are working on issues of poverty would really help make a more extensive impact.
I believe I'm a single mother. I do own my own vehicle. I do have my own house. I'm in the process of just trying to keep a job going, so I don't believe how public assistance should be helping me, but I should be lacking everything that I still need for myself.
What are we doing, those of us who work within human services or other organizations that are supporting people living in poverty, what are we doing to make sure that we're not re-traumatizing folks and keeping them out and contributing to that sense of hopelessness?
But I appreciate Women's Co-op. Women's Co-op is an excellent, excellent place to get help and receive help.
One of my favorite resources in town is the Women's Co-op. And the reason is their thought process about how to deal with folks in poverty, the hand-up approach, and being accountable and making the participants part of the process instead of just the end result, and having a say in their own way. I think that's the way to do it.
When I was a kid, we frequently had to depend on things that other people gave us to be able to survive. So we had to rely on services, we had to rely on the other folks that could do this, and I think that I didn't have a name for any of that when I was a kid. I just knew that when there was a need, it felt like something was there for us. Why it drives everything that I do is because of my own experience, and that I want other folks to have opportunities to have different trajectories for their children's life, for their lives. I want to be able to create as much opportunity as I can, and I think I bring authentic voice to a lot of the work because I experienced it. I'm not just sitting somewhere and reading reports and saying, oh, this is what it must be like. You know, I felt it in my bones.
I started my life really poor. We didn't have much of anything. I mean, I often say we just never had enough, but we always had just enough. And because of that, you know, I could see generationally my family building its way out of poverty. So when I became a professional, I was interested in solving those type of problems. How do you help people? How do you fix a community? How do you get people on the right track? How do you stabilize a company so that people have a job to go to?
If you're going to have a stable society, you have to have stable families that are nurturing, capable people who can grow up and can nurture their own stable sort of family unit and block and have a stable society that continues into the future. And that means you have to take care of the ones that are here right now so you can keep nurturing that into the future. I think somewhere along the line, we kind of, as a society, we kind of dropped off some elements of that.
People really need to come together. They really need to revisit that old notion about how a community takes care of itself.
The work around supporting families and individuals in poverty is the empowerment. To see that growth is important to me as an individual because I believe we all have strengths and we all need help sometimes.
As a member of the Women's Co-op, doing this work means to me, I think it's all about love and unity and respect. And I think it's personal to everyone because even maybe the people on the tippy top, they have to know somebody or they had to have come from the very bottom. And even if they haven't, I think there's something inside of all of us that wants to help the next person.